Many men don't realize that women often start missing a man not because he changes dramatically, but because he stops being taken for granted. When a man consistently provides attention, energy, and availability without boundaries, a woman may unconsciously begin to undervalue his presence. This isn't about manipulation, it's about human psychology. Absence, distance, and self-respect can trigger reflection and longing. Women notice when a man holds his ground, prioritizes his life, and maintains his own standards, and that energy can make them start appreciating him in ways they didn't before. Understanding this dynamic is crucial for men who want to foster genuine attraction and respect. When a man stops overextending himself emotionally, becomes less predictable, or simply invests more in his own life, women often experience a sense of loss. That feeling can awaken dormant appreciation, reminding her of the value and uniqueness of the man she once took for granted. This process is rooted in psychology. People notice absence more acutely than presence, and they crave what they perceive as rare or unavailable. In this video, we'll break down 7 key ways women start missing a man they once took for granted. We'll explore the behaviors, subtle signals, and mindset shifts that create this dynamic naturally. By understanding how attraction, respect, and reflection work in female psychology, men can position themselves as memorable, high-value individuals. Each of these points highlights how boundaries, presence, and self-respect play a critical role in making a woman recognize the impact of a man she may have previously overlooked. 1. Stops overextending himself. The first way women start missing a man they took for granted is when he stops overextending himself. Many men make the mistake of constantly bending over backwards, agreeing to every request, always being available, and sacrificing their own needs to keep her happy. At first, this may seem like dedication, but over time, it creates familiarity and even complacency. When a man maintains boundaries, invests in his own life, and stops prioritizing her above all else, she notices the shift. That absence of unlimited availability triggers reflection. She begins to realize what she had and starts questioning how she took him for granted. Women are wired to notice value when it is contrasted with absence. When a man overextends, his worth can appear normal and expected. But the moment he pulls back, without drama, complaints, or passive aggression, she experiences a subtle, psychological shift. Suddenly, she sees him as a man with standards, self-respect, and independence. That realization sparks appreciation and often longing. The act of pulling back demonstrates that he values himself and is not dependent on her approval, which is inherently attractive. Maintaining boundaries doesn't mean being cold or detached. A man can still be caring, supportive, and present, but the key is intentionality. When he selectively invests time and energy, she notices the difference because his availability becomes meaningful rather than taken for granted. Small acts of engagement become more significant, and she starts connecting those moments with his overall value. This dynamic works because human psychology responds to contrast. When a man who was once always present becomes selective, it creates scarcity. Scarcity increases perceived value and encourages reflection. She starts to remember the consistency, kindness, and presence he offered before, and that memory triggers both nostalgia and recognition of what she overlooked. Another important aspect is emotional independence. When a man stops overextending, he signals that his emotional stability does not hinge on her attention or validation. Women notice this balance of care and independence, and it can evoke a longing that was absent when he was constantly available. She begins missing the reassurance, attention, and connection that once felt ordinary but are now framed as rare. Ultimately, pulling back strategically while maintaining self-respect makes a woman reevaluate her behavior and feelings. It shifts her perception from taking him for granted to appreciating his presence. That emotional recalibration is powerful because it leverages absence, reflection, and recognition, all of which are key drivers of female psychology. The man who knows when to step back without creating drama becomes unforgettable because he combines value, independence, and stability in a way few others can match. 2. Invests in his own life. The second way women start missing a man they took for granted is when he begins investing in his own life. Many men make the mistake of centering their existence around a woman, giving her all their time, energy, and focus. While this may seem noble, it often leads to her underestimating his value. Women naturally respect men who are independent, ambitious, and fully engaged with their own goals. When a man redirects energy into personal growth, hobbies, career, or friendships, she begins to notice his absence in a new light, sparking reflection and, eventually, longing. Investing in his own life signals self-respect and high value. Women instinctively respond to men who have a purpose beyond them because it shows that their attention is earned rather than automatically given. When she sees that he is occupied with meaningful pursuits, she starts to perceive him as more rare and significant. This shift in perception triggers appreciation for his qualities, often making her realize how much she previously took for granted. The psychology behind this is simple. Absence creates recognition. When a man is fully engaged in his own life, he is no longer a constant in her world. This space allows her to reflect on what he contributes to her emotional and social life. The activities he invests in also serve as markers of competence, ambition, and confidence, traits women value subconsciously. She notices not only his physical absence, but the intangible qualities that his independence communicates, such as discipline, self-assurance, and ambition. Investing in his own life doesn't mean cutting her off or becoming distant. It means maintaining balance. He can still engage with her, show affection, and provide meaningful interaction, but it is measured, intentional, and framed by his own priorities. This measured presence makes the time spent together more valuable and memorable. She begins to associate him with energy, purpose, and independence, qualities that heighten her attraction and reinforce respect. Additionally, when a man prioritizes himself, he becomes less reactive to her moods, demands, or inconsistencies. Women notice men who have emotional and mental stability and are not constantly available to absorb stress or cater to whims. That stability creates a sense of security and admiration, leading her to reassess her previous lack of appreciation. Ultimately, investing in his own life transforms a man from someone who can be taken for granted into someone remarkable. By focusing on personal growth, maintaining independence, and engaging in meaningful pursuits, he activates a psychological trigger in women: respect and longing. She starts to miss the man she once overlooked because his value is now visible through his actions, energy, and priorities. He becomes unforgettable because he embodies a balance of presence, purpose, and self-respect that few men achieve. 3. Stops seeking constant approval. The third way women start missing a man they took for granted is when he stops seeking constant approval. Many men fall into the trap of needing validation from a woman to feel secure in the relationship. They ask for reassurance, over-explain their actions, or bend to her preferences in an attempt to gain approval. While this may seem attentive, it often diminishes their perceived value. Women are naturally drawn to men who are self-assured, independent, and secure in their own worth. When a man stops seeking constant validation, it shifts the dynamic, creating intrigue and sparking longing. By maintaining self-confidence and demonstrating that his worth is not dependent on her approval, A man signals strength and maturity. Women notice this immediately because it contrasts with the typical dynamic where they unconsciously hold power over his emotions. When she realizes that he is emotionally independent, she begins to reflect on her own behavior and how she previously took his presence and energy for granted. This reflection often leads to a growing sense of appreciation and eventually longing. Stopping the need for approval also changes the energy of interactions. Conversations feel lighter, more balanced, and less like a negotiation. A man who demonstrates emotional independence creates a space where she can engage freely without being the center of his insecurities. That calm, confident energy is magnetic because it communicates high value without words. She begins to notice not only what he does for her, but the quality of the man he is when he prioritizes himself. Psychologically, scarcity and perceived independence are powerful triggers. When a man stops seeking approval, his energy is no longer automatically available. That absence causes her to reflect on what she previously overlooked: the patience, support, and emotional stability he consistently offered. She begins to miss the calm, confident presence that once seemed ordinary, but now feels rare and meaningful. Additionally, not seeking constant approval strengthens boundaries. A man who respects himself and his priorities demonstrates that he is not easily manipulated or taken for granted. Women are drawn to men who have limits, standards, and self-respect because it communicates value in a tangible way. Over time, she begins to reassess her own behavior and develop a newfound appreciation for the stability, consistency, and presence he embodies. Ultimately, when a man stops seeking constant approval, he elevates himself from being someone expected to someone remarkable. Women start noticing his worth in ways they didn't before, and the psychological shift sparks longing. By cultivating emotional independence, self-respect, and consistent boundaries, a man activates the realization that he is rare, dependable, and valuable, a combination that leaves a lasting impression. 4. Becomes less available. The fourth way women start missing a man they took for granted is when he becomes less available. Many men make themselves constantly present, answering messages immediately, agreeing to every plan, or being available at all hours. While this may initially be seen as attentive, over time it can lead to complacency. Women begin to take this presence for granted, forgetting the effort, time, and energy he invests. When a man intentionally creates space, maintains boundaries, and limits his availability without drama, she begins to notice his absence in a powerful way. Becoming less available doesn't mean withdrawing affection or engagement entirely. It means being selective with his time and energy. A man who invests in his priorities first, while still showing meaningful presence, communicates value. Women notice when his attention is not automatic. It becomes something earned and meaningful. That scarcity triggers reflection and longing, because she begins to associate his energy with rarity, not entitlement. Absence awakens appreciation for the consistency and presence she once took for granted. This dynamic works because it taps into a fundamental principle of psychology. Humans naturally desire what is not constantly available. When a man pulls back subtly, he creates space for reflection. She starts recalling the ways he supported her, made her feel special, or contributed to her life. Those memories, previously overlooked, become vivid because contrast highlights their significance. She begins to realize what she missed when his presence was a given. Less availability also signals independence and self-respect. Women are attracted to men who have their own life, ambitions, and priorities. By maintaining focus on his personal goals, friendships, and passions, he communicates that his world is not dependent on her attention. That energy is magnetic because it demonstrates confidence and emotional maturity, and women instinctively respect men who operate from that space. Importantly, reducing availability without creating tension or drama requires emotional intelligence. A stoic approach, calm, consistent, and respectful, ensures that she feels the space without feeling abandoned. That balance is rare and memorable. She begins to miss the emotional stability and presence he provides, recognizing it as a unique combination that she previously undervalued. Ultimately, when a man becomes less available, he shifts from being taken for granted to being missed. Women start reflecting on his value, presence, and the emotional energy he brings into their lives. By creating intentional absence while maintaining high standards and engagement, a man triggers appreciation and longing. He becomes unforgettable because scarcity, boundaries, and independence elevate his perceived worth and remind her of the qualities she once overlooked.
5. Maintains his standards. The fifth way women start missing a man they took for granted is when he consistently maintains his standards. Many men compromise too often, agreeing to things that go against their values, tolerating behavior that disrespects them, or avoiding conflict to keep peace. While this may seem like being accommodating, it often reduces perceived value. Women are naturally drawn to men who uphold their principles and act with integrity. When a man refuses to lower his standards and enforces boundaries respectfully, it triggers reflection and admiration, making her realize what she previously overlooked. Maintaining standards demonstrates self-respect and strength. Women instinctively notice when a man is unwavering in his beliefs, routines, or expectations. It signals that he values himself, his time, and his energy. This presence of self-worth creates a psychological shift. She begins to see him as rare, dependable, and high value, contrasting sharply with men who bend under pressure or chase approval. That recognition can spark longing, particularly if she previously took his patience, generosity, or kindness for granted. High standards also reinforce boundaries without creating conflict. A man can be kind, attentive, and loving while making it clear that certain behaviors are unacceptable or non-negotiable. This balance of care and firmness creates respect and admiration. She begins to appreciate his consistency and the emotional safety he provides, qualities she may have overlooked when they were always readily available. Psychologically, standards function as a marker of value. When she sees a man who doesn't compromise on his principles, she starts to recognize the depth of his character. His consistency in upholding what matters to him highlights reliability and strength, qualities that women subconsciously associate with long-term attraction and security. She begins missing the way he made her feel supported, respected, and guided, which she may have previously assumed was normal. Maintaining standards also encourages reflection on her behavior. When a man enforces boundaries and maintains his values, it challenges her to evaluate how she treated him in the past. She notices when she may have taken his patience or generosity for granted. That awareness fosters appreciation, longing, and often a desire to reconnect on a deeper, more respectful level. Ultimately, a man who maintains his standards becomes unforgettable because he embodies consistency, self-respect, and integrity. Women start noticing the difference between his presence and that of men who lack principles. By holding firm, he not only preserves his value, but also activates a psychological process that makes her reflect on what she lost when he was readily available. This combination of boundaries, integrity, and emotional stability triggers attraction and lingering respect, ensuring that she begins to miss the man she once took for granted. 6. Shows emotional independence. The sixth way women start missing a man they took for granted is when he demonstrates emotional independence. Many men inadvertently make themselves indispensable by relying on a woman for validation, happiness, or stability. This dependency can dull attraction over time because women unconsciously sense that the man's self-worth is contingent upon their attention. Emotional independence changes the dynamic entirely. When a man maintains his composure, manages his own emotions, and doesn't overreact to her moods, she begins noticing the qualities she previously overlooked and starts missing the calm, grounded presence he provides. Emotional independence signals strength and maturity. Women are drawn to men who are stable regardless of external circumstances. When a man handles stress, conflict, and uncertainty without becoming volatile, he creates a sense of security. That security is magnetic because it allows a woman to feel safe emotionally while also respecting his boundaries. Over time, this combination of stability and self-reliance triggers reflection and appreciation. She begins recalling how he supported her, stayed steady through challenges, and maintained his values, memories that generate longing. Showing emotional independence also enhances perceived value. When a man demonstrates that he is in control of his own happiness and not constantly seeking validation, it creates scarcity in a subtle but powerful way. She starts to realize that his attention and care are not automatic. They are conscious choices he makes. That awareness can activate desire and reinforce admiration, making her recognize the significance of the man she once took for granted. Additionally, emotional independence allows a man to engage without being overwhelmed. He can be present, supportive, and connected without losing his own energy or sense of self. Women notice this balance because it contrasts sharply with men who are reactive, needy, or easily destabilized by emotions. The memory of a man who is calm, confident, and emotionally self-sufficient creates a lasting psychological imprint, making her reflect on what she previously failed to appreciate. Ultimately, emotional independence is a cornerstone of becoming unforgettable. Women start missing the man who remained steady, respected his own energy, and navigated life with composure. This quality fosters admiration, respect, and longing because it highlights a rare combination of strength, self-respect, and reliability. By cultivating emotional independence, a man positions himself as someone remarkable, whose presence is valued deeply and whose absence is keenly felt. 7. Maintains mystery and intrigue. The seventh way women start missing a man they took for granted is when he maintains mystery and intrigue. Many men make the mistake of revealing everything about themselves too soon, being overly available and creating predictability. While openness is important, constant availability and predictability can dull attraction. When a man strategically creates an aura of mystery through selective availability, pursuing personal goals, and maintaining independence, he triggers curiosity and reflection. Women begin to notice the man they once overlooked, sparking longing and a renewed appreciation for his presence. Mystery works because it shifts perception. A man who is not always immediately accessible signals that his energy, attention, and time are valuable. Scarcity naturally increases desirability, and women are wired to notice and respect men who have priorities beyond them. This doesn't mean playing games or being manipulative. It means living authentically while keeping your own life full and engaging. By doing so, a man becomes someone she thinks about when he is not around, which is the psychological foundation of missing and valuing him. Intrigue also comes from depth. A man who invests in personal growth, maintains interests outside of the relationship, and challenges himself intellectually and emotionally naturally appears more complex and interesting. Women remember men who have layers, those who are not fully predictable, whose presence brings energy and perspective into their lives. That complexity encourages reflection, causing her to recall the ways he positively impacted her life and the qualities she previously took for granted. Creating mystery doesn't require distance that feels cold or disconnected. A stoic, high-value man balances presence with selective absence. He engages meaningfully when together, but his life remains independent and purposeful. That balance fosters attraction because she recognizes that his attention is conscious, not automatic. She begins associating his presence with value, excitement, and authenticity. Maintaining intrigue also protects emotional energy. When a man is not fully consumed by a woman's attention or expectations, he preserves his own stability and self-respect. Women sense this energy subconsciously and are drawn to it because it signals competence, independence, and confidence. Over time, the contrast between his engaging presence and his independent life creates longing and appreciation. Ultimately, mystery and intrigue make a man unforgettable. Women start missing him because his energy is unique, his attention is meaningful, and his presence carries depth. When combined with boundaries, emotional independence, personal growth, and self-respect, intrigue solidifies attraction, admiration, and reflection. The man who masters this balance becomes someone she cannot take for granted, and his absence becomes a powerful reminder of his value, presence, and the emotional impact he creates. Women begin missing the men they once took for granted when those men shift their energy, boundaries, and presence in ways that highlight value, independence, and self-respect. It isn't about manipulation, it's about living fully, maintaining standards, and prioritizing personal growth. When a man stops overextending himself, invests in his own life, ceases seeking constant approval, becomes less available, upholds his standards, demonstrates emotional independence, and maintains mystery, he triggers a powerful psychological response. Women begin reflecting on his worth, appreciating qualities they once overlooked, and feeling a sense of longing for the connection they had taken for granted. The impact of these behaviors lies in their subtlety. He doesn't create drama, beg for attention, or overcompensate. Instead, he embodies consistency, maturity, and confidence. This combination makes him stand out because it contrasts sharply with men who are reactive, needy, or overly available. Women naturally respond to men who create emotional and psychological space while maintaining presence and reliability. That space encourages reflection, fosters admiration, and ignites attraction in ways that are deep and lasting. Ultimately, the man who implements these principles becomes unforgettable. Women remember him not just for his actions, but for the energy, stability, and integrity he embodies. By focusing on himself, respecting his own worth, and maintaining balance in his interactions, he activates desire, longing, and appreciation in ways that create profound connection. He becomes the type of man whose presence is valued, whose absence is felt, and whose memory leaves a lasting impression.